Before we start, let me introduce what Rise Up Mora is to those who may be new to our series. Rise Up Mora is an initiative by the IEEE student branch of the University of Moratuwa. We aim to enhance undergraduates' employability and career readiness by providing tailored guidance, practical sessions, and insights from industry professionals. Whether it's mastering CV writing, acing interviews, or optimizing your LinkedIn profile, Rise Up Mora is here to help you rise to new heights in your career journey. Moving on, we are excited to announce that IFS has partnered with us as the main industrial partner for Rise Up Mora. This collaboration brings invaluable expertise to our initiative, and we are thrilled to have IFS leading today's session. As we transition into today's session, we are excited to hold on. As we transition into today's session, we are excited to focus on crafting the perfect CV, a critical step in any job search. We are honored to have Mr. Sharon Fernando, a talent acquisition specialist from IFS with us. We are also delighted to welcome other esteemed members from IFS who have joined us today. Your presence truly adds value to this session, and we are grateful for your continued support. With his extensive experience in talent acquisition, Mr. Fernando will guide us through the essentials of effective CV writing and provide invaluable tips on making your CV stand out and increase your chances of securing interviews. Mr. Fernando, we warmly invite you to share your insights with us.
Thank you very much, all. Am I audible? Am I audible? Can
yes,
everyone
yes,
hear me?
Sir, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much for the confirmation. I will need one more confirmation once I share my screen. Right. Can everyone see the screen as well?
Yes, it is, Sharon.
Great. Thank you, Janaka. Right. So good evening to all. As introduced, we'll be taking a few points on about how to craft a perfect CV, right? So before I move on to the session, we'll start with a quick quiz, right? Okay, so what we are going to do is I'll be presenting 5 questions and with 3 options answers, right? Take your time, take 30 seconds for a question and answer or giving the option of the correct answer you think in the chat, right? So the first question will be, how long should your CV be? Or how long do you think your CV should be? A is 1 page, B is 2 pages, C is as long as you want it to be. All right, so you all can give me your answers in the chat. Yet to see any. Right, okay. Keep going, guys. Okay. Right, okay. Oh, I see A, B, 1 page, C, B. C, okay. Right, okay. So I will not be discussing the answers right away. We'll be discussing them at the end. We'll move on to the next question. Okay, so question number 2. What is the mandatory piece of information from below would you think you have to capture in your CV? A is contact details, B is O-level results, and C is a NIC number. What do you think? Okay. Right. I see a lot of A. Anyone? What about your O-level result, or what about your NIC number? Right. Okay. Right. So we spoke about the mandatory information. Now, what do you think is the non-mandatory piece of information from the below? A is your degree, B is your reference, C is your email address. Okay, B. Okay, I see a lot of B. I see A. Okay. Right. None. Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay, great. We got a mix of answers. Fourth question. Right. So what helps an interviewer to get to know about your technical skills or technical know-how, right? First one is project information you are a part of. B, a list of programming languages you have heard of. C, in detail, O-level and A-level exam results. Okay, I see A. Right. Okay, good. Right, I'm getting a good mix of response. Final question. Where does your CV get accumulated when you apply through a career portal? A is shared drive, B is application tracking system, C is in the email box of the interviewer. Right, B, C, okay. Right, interesting. Again, a mix of answers. Good. Right, okay. So I'm getting a lot of B's and C's. Like I mentioned, we'll discuss all of these at the end of the session. Right. Thank you for the responses. So we'll start with a simple question, right? What is a CV? I'm not expecting you to type in your answers, but think of it, right? What exactly is a CV? You will mention about your experience if you have any, about your qualifications, about your personal details, right? So when you are mentioning all these in a piece of document, what do you think a CV is? Think of it for a second, right? And if you search what is a CV in Google or in the internet, you'll be receiving loads and loads of definitions. But what I like the most is a CV is a personal marketing tool, right? So it's a document, like I mentioned, it's a document which will list down all of your experience, your qualifications, your details, your achievements. So it automatically markets yourself for a job in an organization. So make a note of it. A CV is a personal marketing tool which will market yourself for a job opportunity. Right? Okay, moving on. The next question, the most asked question which I get as a recruiter is what is a CV template which I should use, right? So another small exercise, right? I have given you 3 templates, naming 1, 2, and 3. Just type in the chat which template would you use? Number 1, number 2, or number 3? you all would see a difference in all of these three CVs. See, for an example, number 2 does not have a profile picture. Number 1 is starting with the education first, right? Likewise, you all will see a couple of differences. Yeah, so I'm getting a mix of answers again. 1, 2, 3. Right, okay, go on. I'll give another 10 seconds. Right, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, the point is there is no exact CV template, right? So you should choose a template which will right? So when you start a CV as recruiters, what we first notice is the name. So what you should mention is your first name and the surname or the last name, right? So Sri Lankans tend to have multiple names, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 names. So not required to put all of those names in the CV and not required to put the initials and the last name. That's not very right. What you should capture is your first name and your surname or the last name. So for an example, my full name would go in as Hati Sharon Fernando, but in my CV, I would just capture as Sharon Fernando, right? And the professional title. So professional title, it can be a bit tricky because this is expected in candidates who have had experience in a particular job title, right? So for an example, again, if I'm to take my own CV, I would say talent acquisition specialist, talent acquisition partner, likewise. So as fresh graduates or undergraduates, what would you mention in as your professional title? And if you have completed your internship, and if you're applying for a permanent role, you can mention that, right? Maybe a software engineer. If you're an undergraduate, example again, if you're an undergraduate, you can mention as software engineering undergraduate. Or you're interested in towards quality assurance undergraduate, likewise. So your professional title should align with your past experience and your and the job which you are looking to apply for, right? Next, location. Something very important and something which is mistaken by a lot of candidates is to mention the location. See, purposely I'm mentioning as location and not address. Address is not required at the time of we screen you or not required by the time we interview you. What is required for us is the location. When I say location, it's the town and country. Specifically, when I say the town, it can be like, for an example, Colombo, Sri Lanka, can be Sri Lanka, right? So that's what is expected. Why is it expected to mention the town and the country? So town, example again, if you have to mention as Colombo, this will help for the recruiters or the interviewers to know where you are from, right? We will not require to know about your address or your street lane or your exact location. We will just want to know about where you are from, right? Sri Lanka, again, it's very common. I mean, it's if you're applying for jobs opportunities within the island, of course, it's given. But if you're applying for jobs, maybe remote opportunities, freelancing opportunities, likewise, if you're using your CV for applying for job opportunities outside the country, this again will be very, very important. Phone number, again, very, very, very important. So please make sure double check, triple check on the mobile number which you provide. So if you have multiple mobile numbers, right, it is advisable to give a minimum of one, of course. But if you have multiple mobile numbers, limit the mobile numbers you give into your CV to 2, right? And always mention the primary mobile number first, right? So if you have, again, say if you're using 2 numbers, you mention your primary mobile number first, and then include a forward slash, and then give the second number. Mobile number is, again, like I mentioned, it's very, very important, because if you have missed to include any of your information in your CV, right? The first instinct as recruiters, what we do is, call the candidate and we can get it, right? So for us to call, you should give the mobile number correctly. In case if the mobile number is not there, we will not be able to reach out to you to gather any information, to pass the details with regard to screening, or to inform you that you have been shortlisted for an interview. So these communications will not take place if you have not given the correct mobile number. So I'm encouraging you to double check, triple check on the mobile number which you have mentioned in your CV. Then is the email address. So email address, again, is very straightforward, right? You have to give in your email address. But a little tip from a recruiter would be to include a professional email address, right? So as Gen Zs, we would have created our email addresses for various different reasons, right? Maybe to open a Facebook account, maybe to open an Instagram account, right? And for those purposes, we tend to use a bit of, a slang in your email addresses, not very professional, right? So for to give an example, my my first email address was it was mistyboy@gmail.com, right? Do you expect me to use that in my CV? No, not at all. That will give a very negative impression about your profile when we are reviewing your CV, right? What I use now is a very professional, or just the first name and the second name, or the first name and the last name @gmail.com, Yahoo, whatever domain. Use that as your email address, right? Because no matter how perfect your CV is, no matter how much of experience you have, no matter how much of qualifications you possess, small things like this will make the recruiter or the interviewer to judge or to take decisions also. So please make sure to use a professional email address, preferably your first name and your second name @Gmail, Yahoo, or whatever.com, right? Great. What to include in your CV? Now we'll speak about your experience and employment history, right? I understand that there will be a lot of students who does not have prior formal experience, but there could be a few candidates who have completed their internship also. So I'll just cover up on how best you can mention your experience and your employment history. So whenever you're including a past work experience, you always start with the name of the company, right? For an example, if you have worked at IFS, start with IFS, and then mention the title, right? Title could be undergraduate trainee software engineer, undergraduate trainee quality assurance engineer, likewise. So the name of the company and the title should align. It should be together. And then you should, if you have completed your tenure in that organization, you can mention the start date and the end date. So when I say the start date and the end date, we are not looking for the exact start date. Say if you have started on the 1st of January 2020, I'm not looking you to mention 1st January 2020. What I will be looking for is January 2024. So it's always better to include the month and the year. Start date should include the month and the year, and end date, like I mentioned, if you have completed your tenure, you can mention the month and the year of the end date. If you are currently employed, you can mention as to present or to date, likewise. Right. Key responsibilities. So when you grow your career, you will have a lot of tenures in different organizations, right? So what you should capture as key responsibilities. So, it's not just responsibilities, it's the key responsibilities. So you don't have to mention, that you had to handle, that you had to, weekly, I had to go for 5 meetings, weekly, I had to give updates to different stakeholders 5 times a week. Likewise, those can be your responsibility in your career or in your past experience, but that is not your key responsibility. So what we expect here is maybe if you have worked on a particular project, what are the
other?
sorry. Yeah. So speaking about key responsibilities, like I mentioned, for an example, if you have to mention about a past experience, you can mention the scope which you have handled, right? So when I say the scope which you have handled, it can be a lengthy scope. It can go up to 6, 7, 8 bullet points, but limit to maybe 2, 3 bullet points of what you think will impress the recruiter or the interviewer. That is what should be mentioned in the CV. So you should understand the job requirement also, right? For an example, if the job requirement is asking for candidates who have worked with .NET, and if you have handled a project in .NET, you can mention that, right? So those are the ones which you should capture in your CV so that it will be attractive for both the recruiter and the interviewer. Then you should mention your key achievements and projects. Key achievements could be achievements which you have got during your tenure in your internship or in your previous or current organization. So this also could be lengthy based on your tenure. So what you should do is always, like I mentioned, capture the achievements or the projects which you have completed in that organization, which would be relevant and attractive for the job which you are applying for. So this is how you should capture your experience and your employment history in a CV. Moving on, then after you complete so the CV will start with the personal profile where you give your name, your location, your contact details, and then you speak about your experience, and then you come to your education and qualifications. So when you're mentioning your education and qualification details in your CV, I see a lot of candidates who make a common mistake. They tend to mention their qualification in detail, probably semester-wise, subject-wise, each module-wise. They tend to mention about what they have completed, what they have got, what their grades are. Even going back to O-level and A-level results, individually they tend to mention, right? Again, you have to understand when you grow in your career, you will have a lot of weightage towards the experience. So you will not have enough. You can always include these points, but at that point, these information will not be very much relevant for the recruiter or the interviewer. So what you should capture is, again, very, very important, is the institution name, right? So when I say institution name, it can be either the university or the college, and again, the dates. Again, when I say the dates, it is not the exact date, it can be the month and the year. So if you have again completed it, you can mention from this month year to this month year, you have studied at this university or college. Then qualification and subject, or qualification or subject, and the grade. So when I say qualification or subject, you can mention what qualification or what is the degree program or what is the master's program which you have completed, right? For an example, bachelor in computer science. So likewise, you have to mention that and give in the grade. It can be the GPA, it can be the honors class. So likewise, you will have to mention that specifically if you are comfortable in mentioning, right? You don't have to, what I'm trying to say is you don't have to specifically mention all the other details. As recruiters and interviewers, what we expect in a CV is the institute name and the qualification and the grade. Right. Moving on, special awards and projects. Again, another very frequent question which I get as a recruiter is, should I include my, awards, special awards, which could be either relevant to the job or not, and the projects which I have handled apart from the university, right? So this can be like, freelancing projects and likewise. So special awards which you have received throughout your university program is a must. You have to include that because that will definitely give you the competitive advantage compared to the other candidate. Say, if for an example, right? For an example, we have two profiles, very similar profiles. They have done their degree at the same university. Both the candidates have gone through the internship program. Both the candidates have the relevant experience in the relevant tech stack. But one candidate has also mentioned their special awards, which they have received in their university and also which they have received in their career or in their internship program. They are any specific awards, or they have mentioned about their additional projects not related to their scope, but additional projects which they have handled. So in an instance like that, where we have two similar type of profiles, but one candidate has mentioned these these awards and projects, then we tend to give that competitive advantage. That it could be an added advantage for that candidate, based on when we are just looking at the CVs. I'm not saying that we will, hire that candidate. It's just I'm saying that that candidate would have a competitive advantage when we are reviewing the two CVs side by side. Of course, they will go through the interview process. Of course, they will have to, do the interview well and all that. But at a glance, when we are looking at those CVs, the candidate who would have mentioned the special awards or projects which they have handled would have that competitive advantage over the other candidate. So always make sure to include any special awards which you have got. I would say prioritize the one which is more relevant to the job, but also include the ones which you have got along the way, maybe throughout your university, maybe throughout your internship. And likewise, projects also prioritize the ones which is relevant to the job, right? But again, mention the ones which you have mention the projects which you have completed throughout your university time or throughout your internship time. Right. Couple of tips on things to avoid in a CV, right? There are a lot of things which you should avoid in a CV. I'm sure that you are aware on most of it, but these are little things which again could give that advantage if you avoid in your CV. First point is exaggeration or falsehood. Right. So what I say exaggeration or falsehood, it's two different things, right? Exaggeration is something else, falsehood is something else. Right. Example, falsehood, right? Falsehood is basically you're lying in your CV, right? So that is very much not tolerated. When I say falsehood, say for an example, if you have to take an example, we are again will speak in the software engineering terms, right? we are looking for a software engineer who has done their internship in .NET, right? Example, right? Example. We are looking for a software engineer who has completed their bachelor's and who has done their internship in .NET programming language. Two situations, right? Falsehood and exaggerations. Falsehood is a candidate who has done their internship. Okay, they have done their internship, but they did not have any exposure to .NET. But they claim to have experience with .NET just to get into this position. That is falsehood. So that is not tolerated at all. Exaggeration. When we speak about exaggeration, is again similar situation. We are looking for software engineers who have done their internship in .NET. This candidate, they have completed the internship. They have done multiple projects in their internship. They just were exposed to .NET, but they did not have hands-on experience. But they mention in their CV that they are very thorough and they have had hands-on experience in .NET programming language. Now that is exaggeration. They are right on having exposure to .NET, but then the candidates saying that they are, a master in that programming language and that they have had hands-on experience in that programming language is exaggerations. So like I mentioned, two different things which you should avoid at all costs. There can be instances where you would use exaggeration or falsehood in your CV and, in different ways face the interview and get the job. You will also go up to the point where you will get the job, but you will not be able to perform because you do not have the experience which was required. So getting the job is one thing, but performing in the job, sustaining in the job, growing your career in that organization is another thing. So once you get the job, and if you are not able to perform and sustain in that role, that means it's a very, very bad negative impression on your profile. So you could fool the interviewer or the recruiter by mentioning falsehood or exaggerations in your CV. But at the end of the day, once you come into, once you get selected and once you come into the job, if you cannot deliver what is expected, that will look bad on you. So this has a bigger impact than you think. So please keep in mind not to ever, give false information and exaggerate the experience or qualifications or whatever it is in your CV. Next point is lack of clarity. Okay, again, another example, right? I spoke about mentioning your experience, your responsibilities, key responsibilities in your CV, right? So you can go on and on and on about it. If you have had the experience, you can go on and on about it, which will make zero sense to the recruiter or the interviewer just by reading through it. What you have to do is, you have to pick the right things. Now, say if it's my CV, I will have 101 things to include in the CV, right? Because again, it's a self-marketing tool. So you want to give the best impression about yourself to the recruiter or to the interviewer. So you want to give as much as information as you want in your CV. But one thing which you have to note is, as recruiters and as interviewers, we tend to go through hundreds, 150s, 200s of CVs per day, right? And if of those 200 CVs have lack of clarity of information, it will be a very, very bad day for us, right? So for us to look at the CV and go, this is the right candidate. As candidates, you should always give in the information with precise clarity. So that's what is required here. giving your experience in a one full page, or giving your qualifications in one full page is what it is not what is expected. You have to be precise and with full of clarity in the information which you are providing. Moving on, incomplete contact details. I spoke about it. It is very, very, very important. There are instances where, see, contact details is one of the most vital things in a CV, right? So if, say, for an example, you're applying for a job, your mobile number has to be of 10 digits, but you have given 11 digits, right? Okay. But somehow we tend to get the mobile number, get the contact number. But again, we could think, if a candidate is making such a small mistake in such an important document, right? Mentioning their mobile number, which they use, which they own, mentioning the mobile number correctly in a CV. If they are not able to do that task correctly, how much of attention to detail can we expect them if we select them for the job, right? So that's what we think as recruiters and as interviewers. That's what we think, right? It's not about missing a number or including an extra number in your contact details, but that small information, missing a small information or adding an extra information could make the break or make moment, right? Because everything which you capture in your CV will have an impact from the recruiter or from the interviewer. So always double check, triple check, give it to your friends, give your CV to your friends, give it to your family members, get them read through it, just ask them if it makes sense, ask them if the details, if the contact details are correct. So you have to make sure that this small step, which it is a small step, right? It is a small information, but it is a very, very important information. So you have to make sure that this contact detail is mentioned properly. Another example which I would like to tell you all is uh, these are okay. This was for a requirement for a school leaver, right? School leaver is what was the expectation is basically candidates who have just passed out of their schools, basically who have just completed their A levels, and they are waiting for results, right? That is the context. That is the requirement we are looking for from candidates. So what happened is I saw two CVs. I saw the CV. Okay, looks good. I have shortlisted. Then I opened the second CV. It was also with the same format, right? It was with the same format, just that the name was changed, address was changed, and referee details were changed. Likewise, the important or the key points have been changed, but unfortunately, the candidate has missed to change the contact number. So what has happened is the two candidates they are from the same school. I'm assuming they're good friends, so they have done their CV together. So one candidate has copied the format of the other candidate and has changed the name, the address, the referee details, and likewise, but has missed to change the contact details, right? So I'm sure y'all you have gone through the universities and all of that. I'm sure this will not be the case, but I just wanted to share that that experience which I had, which was funny at that time, which I was like thinking, okay, can't they do their own CV? Which was again, like I mentioned, which was funny at that time. But again, to think of it more, it can happen. It can happen. You can copy the CV and all of that. But my point, which I'm trying to say, is double check, triple check on the details which is captured in the CV. Right? We will not mind if you have copied the CV or not, but what we mind is giving the correct details, the correct information, and like I mentioned, without exaggerations and falsehoods, giving the what you have done, and like I mentioned, the correct information. If you have captured that, that is what we look for, right? Including confidential information. So this is very, very tricky, right? This is very, very, very tricky. Yeah, confidential information can be, some might say is very standard, but it can be different from other, because it's very subjective, right? Now, say for me, something can be very confidential. Some personal detail of mine can be very confidential, but for some other person, it can be not confidential. They are very comfortable in sharing that detail, right? So as a practice, just check on whether this information which you're going to share in your CV is actually required for the recruiters or the interviewers. Sorry, I just got a message. Y'all can keep on. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just got a question. Y'all can keep on giving questions. I will take up the questions at the very end. Right. So about confidential information, like I mentioned, it can be subjective. So, but just think again about whether that information is actually required by the recruiter or the interviewer, right? Say confidential information, even though it can be subjective, there are other confidential information is very straightforward, and it should not be mentioned in your CV, right? Now, for an example, when I say subjective, marital status, right? Marital status, it can be either single, married, or divorced, or whatever. For some, it can be not confidential. They are very comfortable in sharing that. But for some, it's confidential, right? I mean, not at the point of sharing the CV, that information could be confidential. But at the point when they get selected or when they are getting enrolled to the organization, of course, they will have to share those details. But at the time of sharing the CV, it could be confidential for the candidate. So, which is understandable, right? But certain other details, right? Like, say, for an example, again, if I have to share an example, I came across a CV, an experienced candidate, right? They have worked in multiple organizations. So what happened is they have applied, so they have stayed in one organization for the past maybe 5 years. Yeah, 5 years. For the past 5 years, they have stayed in one particular organization. So when they have applied, they have mentioned a specific section about their performance ranking in their job in that organization, right? So for an example, if I'm working at ABC company for 5 years, so each year we will have the performance review, performance ranking. So those performance rank is mentioned in the CV. I think what the candidate is trying to show is that that I'm a high performer, right? They would have got an A or a B. They're trying to show that they're high performer and they have achieved these performance in the past years. But to include that in a CV is not right. It's a confidential information because performance ranking is not discussed even with the employees of that organization, right? It's a very confidential information. For that candidate to share that confidential information to external public, it was a very questionable situation. So because of that itself, we were not comfortable enough to move that candidate forward, right? So again, this small information which you all are mentioning in your CV, it can be small, but it can tend to be a decision maker for a recruiter or an interviewer. So please be careful on what you include in your CV, and whatever you include, like I mentioned, double check, triple check. Send it to your closest friends, send it to your family members, ask them to review, and if it's all okay, then you can submit it. Then, of course, excessive length, like I mentioned, as recruiters, we tend to go up go look at hundreds of CVs per day. And if one CV is up to 4 or 5 pages, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying a CV cannot be for 4 or 5 pages. It can be if the candidate has 20 plus years of experience. Then they have to mention each tenure, what they have done, and all of that. But unnecessarily going for excessive length in a CV just to show that you have had this much of experience is not right. When we review hundreds of CVs, and if one CV is going for 4 or 5 pages, and to review all of those 100 CVs, if they are also 4 or 5 pages, it's going to be a big task for us. It's going to be a headache for us. So this will directly correlate to the lack of clarity also. Keep your CV, the number of pages, of course, keep it as much as you require based on the information which you're providing, but make sure that information is precise and it gives the correct clarity, right? So those are the things to avoid in a CV. Right, moving on. Right, so here we are talking about some tips and tricks for your CV to stand out from the rest, right? Because as undergraduates and recent graduates, when you are going to apply for job opportunities in the market, your CV can look very similar to other students, other undergraduates, other recent graduates in the market, right? Because it will be very limited to your primary education, your university education, and your internship experience if you have had any. So the decisive factor of whether to shortlist or not can be on little things like formatting and spacing the CV properly, right? So that this can be, again, it can be a very small thing, very very usual thing for all candidates to do on their CV, but this has a very big impact to the recruiter or the interviewer's eyes. So first thing is to make sure you properly capture the font type and the font size and the page margin. So 3 things, right? Font type, font size, and page margin. When you're making a CV, page margin is automatically there. So keep that margin constant, right? The page margin has to be constant throughout the different pages if you're using multiple pages for a CV. Font type and font size, again, it has to be consistent. Please remember the word consistent. So font type, if you're giving, say, topic, now say when I say topic, it can be experience. Experience can be with one font type. And then you give in your experience. And then the next topic will be qualifications. So qualifications and experience should be of one font type and one font size. The description about under experience and qualification could be a different font type and different font size. So what you have to make sure is consistency. If you can go on to multiple pages, right? You can go to 2-3 pages, but make sure all of your text, all of your, the heading, all of your paragraph or the details which you have given are of same font size and font type based on heading and subject. This has to be consistent throughout the document. See, again, you might think this is a very usual and a small thing, but as recruiters, we have come across multiple CVs where one page of the CV is in different font font type and font size. The other page of the CV is in a different font type and font size, which tends to question us if they can't type in a CV properly. How are we to recruit them for an organization where they will have to type in on a daily basis, right? They have to type, or basically they will have to sorry, they will have to send emails, type in reports, make presentations to deliver to the stakeholders. Likewise, we tend to question if they can't do a simple CV with consistent font type and font size, how well they can they adapt to a work environment. So again, see, it's a small thing for candidates to make note of, but it can lead to a bigger impact in a recruiter or an interviewer's mind, right? Because I have had multiple interviewers where candidates CV could be impressive, right? They have had brilliant experience, brilliant qualifications, but it's not consistent. The font type and the font size is consistent. Based on that itself, like I mentioned, it could be a red flag for the interviewer, and they can think in that way, and we tend to keep that profile aside, and then visit that later on if we don't find any other candidates. So there are multiple locations I can give you as examples. Where we have deprioritized a candidate based on this small thing. Again, avoid big and messy paragraphs. Like I mentioned to you, whatever you're trying to mention in a CV, you don't have to mention it in a big paragraph. You can say, again, like I mentioned, about your job experience. You don't have to mention I did this and this and this. I work with different team members. I overlooked a team of maybe 5 members. You don't have to mention all of that in one paragraph. You can segregate it into bullet points. Then it will be better taken, or better when we review the CV. It will be noted better for us rather than reading through a big paragraph. So always make sure that you don't give in a big paragraph. You just mention, you just mention about about your experience or your project which you have handled in bullet points. Again, I will take that example. Experience I spoke to you about, you can mention in bullet points. Say for an example, you have worked on a project throughout your academic program. I'm sure you will have gone through multiple projects. We'll take, for an example, a group project which you have done, right? So if you're going to explain the group project which you have done, it could go to a lengthy, paragraph. What you can do is to minimize that, or to give it or to give that information in a very nicer way. You can separate it properly. You can give in first, whether it's an individual project or a group project, you can mention that, how many project members were there in the team, what was the project scope, like what was the end outcome, what is required to do, and maybe a small 1 or 2 line paragraph to explain on what happened, how did it happen, and given the technologies which you have used to do that project. So likewise, don't give in, not necessarily the big paragraph also, but meaningless paragraph also is not encouraged, right? You will have to give in, like I mentioned in the previous slide, it has to be precise, and it has to be with clarity. Right. Proofreading and consistency, like I mentioned, proofreading is very, very, very important, right? And since you're the one who is doing the CV, something which you miss can be caught in some other person, right? So like I mentioned, not necessary to share your CV to each and everyone, but get in a couple of friends who are very close to you, who you can trust, and then giving the CV to them for their review. If they come across any, they will let you know. Give in to a couple of family members, couple of relatives, couple of friends or colleagues who are working in an organization. So when they go through your CV, they will definitely, of course, let you know about mistakes which you have done, as in the things which you should not capture in your CV, but also they can mention a few more things which you should capture in your CV, right? For an example, something which you have achieved in your school days, which could be relevant to the job which you're applying for. That can be missed by you because it was done in your school days, which was some time back. So you might not think of it, but when someone who knows you very well, if they proofread it, they might pick that point and tell them you could include that. No, that could be a good point for you to include, which can give an advantage for your job which you are applying for, right? So proofreading, not only by yourself, but a few people who are close to you is very important. And consistency, like I mentioned, consistency throughout the document, throughout your CV is very, very important. Right. Keep colors conventional, right? So again, like I mentioned in the beginning, there is no specific format. And when I say no specific format, there is no specific color also to use. Some might, again, a very funny example. A candidate who is known, they came and asked me, if I use if I use blue color in my CV, will that be better reached? Will that be better for me to use blue color in my CV? Probably psychologically, maybe yes, right? But there is no hard and fast rule for you to use only one color or one particular specific color for you to use like that. No, nothing like that. But it's encouraged for you to use conventional colors, right? Not maybe a dark red or a dark brown, which could be difficult for the person viewing the CV to read through, right? So something maybe like a light color, light blue or light orange or light red itself. So there is no specific color, but keeping the colors conventional is very important, right? Again, it's not that to say that if you're going to apply for IFS, so you have to use purple as your CV, purple color in your CV, then only you will get noticed. Nothing like that. There is no hard and fast rule for you to use blue color only for CV or red color only for CV, nothing like that. But to use conventional colors is very important. It should not as soon as you open a CV, it should be easy to read through. So that keep that in your mind and decide on the format and decide on the colors and likewise. Right. Another interesting thing, rename and format while saving the document. Again, a very common mistake multiple candidates do, right? They perfect the CV, right? They perfect it. They give in, the relevant keywords, the relevant, information regarding the experience. They have everything, qualifications, experience, exposure to technologies, everything they have. But when they send in the CV, the file name will be my first draft 2021 January, right? Which is fine, but it does not give a good impression on your candidacy, right? Um, I have had multiple examples where I have received CVs like that. Blue collar CV, 2021 first draft, likewise. So what is required here and what is there for you is to note to rename the file, right? You will perfect your CV, right? You will perfect the document with the details which you are going to mention. And then once the document is saved, rename it to your first name and the second name or the last name. Surname. This will this will give a complete, an experience when you're sharing your profile, which again, it can be a very small thing for you, but for us recruiters and for the interviewers, they might think they have taken time to perfect the CV and also made note to change the file name to the name. So this will show that you have attention to detail, right? So likewise, it can be a very small thing that you do, but it will show in a bigger impact for the recruiters and the interviewers when they look at it. So very, very important for you to rename the document or your CV once you have made the changes, once you have completed the final draft, and once you have saved it. Before you send it to the relevant organization, you will have to rename it to your first name and your second name. Right. Coming back to a few more tips, right? So those were the tips on how better you can format your CV. These are tips, technical tips, right? Technical tips on how to better um, um, do your CV, or perfect your CV, and to stand out from the rest of the candidates. Right. So first one is tailor your CV for each job. Right. So again, a very, very interesting experience which I have had is, candidates tend to use cover letters, right? You must be knowing cover letters and the CV, which I mentioned to you about mentioning the job title, or they might give a small paragraph about what their their summary of their experience, what they are looking for. Likewise, they might give a small paragraph in their CV under their name. So candidates tend to use the same CV for multiple jobs, for different jobs, right? So I have had experience where I have received a finance background candidate, right? A candidate with finance background applying for roles in finance department and in audit department, right? For two different jobs. Could be with a similar experience which we are requiring for, but two different jobs, right? So they have mentioned about how they have the finance experience, and at the end, in the cover letter, they have mentioned that I'm applying for this job in the finance department. What happened is they have used the same cover letter for both jobs, right? Again, see, it's a very small thing, right? The candidates will not have time to do the CV each time, but that will show again about your attention to detail, about how consistent you are. So those small things at the end of the day can be a decision maker. So when I say tailor your CV for each job, first thing is to when you see an opportunity in an organization, say for an example in IFS, go to that job, right? You might come across the job in LinkedIn or Facebook or even in the career portal, in our IFS career portal. My first suggestion is for you to go through the job, right? Understand what the job requirement is, right? And then make your CV, which you're going to apply for this job at IFS, specifically make it for IFS, right? You can mention about, say, for an example, right? Again, purely an example, right? Candidate who has had 4 years of experience in software engineering, right? They have had um, no, we'll forget about software engineering. We'll go back to normal business management, business operations ones, right? So candidate who has worked in HR for 4 years, right? They can candidate has had worked in HR department in multiple organizations for 4 years. So throughout the 4 years, they have handled functions like talent acquisition, operations, payroll, likewise, right? Example, right? So they have had exposure to these functions. they are looking at a job opportunity for a talent acquisition executive, right? So when they go through the job description, when the candidate goes through the job description, they have to make sure to emphasize their experience on talent acquisition in their past 10 years, because they're applying for a job in talent acquisition, right? Again, not you have to make sure to not exaggerate and give falsehood information, but emphasize on the existing experience you have into the job role which you're applying for. So first, always go to the job description, understand the requirement, and tailor your CV for that particular job description. I know it's time consuming, but if you tailor your CV for that particular job, the chances of you being screened or shortlisted are much higher. Next is to include keywords. Why is it important to use keywords, right? So most organizations use ATS, applicant tracking system, to collect the CVs, right? So when we collect CVs, the ATS will automatically gather the keywords which you have used in your CV to rank your profile or rank your CV on the expectation based on the keywords which you have given, right? So this is very, very, very important when you are applying for jobs. Again, you have to keep in mind, you should not exaggerate. You should not. So when I say keywords, it can be, again, for an example, say you have worked with, same example, you have worked with .NET. You have mentioned about it, but in your skills, you can mention about .NET specifically. You have to mention that that you have had hands-on experience with .NET. But just because you have heard about .NET and you have had a bit of exposure to .NET, you can't mention that in your keyword or your key skills, right? That can again lead to exaggeration and falsehood. So please make sure for the relevant skills which you have, include them as keywords, because that keyword is how the ATS will track you and rank you as a candidate compared to the others in the market. Professional design, again, is very, very important. When you're applying, again, another example which I can tell you is we were looking for a UI UX designer, right? A UI UX designer. Their core job is to, look after the user experience and the user interface of a product or a software or a application, whatever it is, right? For a UI UX designer, I received a CV in a Word document, very simple Word document where they have mentioned about their experience and their qualification, not even, converted into a PDF. They have just done it into a Word document, which is fine, right? Which is fine, which is not, I'm not saying it's wrong, but again, that small thing can be a decision maker, right? So for a UI UX job, if you are to send in a CV in a Word document, we might question on how well you are with, graphic designing and all of that, right? So professional design is again very, very important in terms of your CV. You have to keep it professional. You have to keep it consistent. You have to make it, again, like I mentioned, think about how well it can be read through from a recruiter's or an interviewer's eye. That is what is very, very important. Before you start to do your CV, think about how well it will be looked at. Is it easy to read? Is my information precise? So think about all of those things, and finally keep it to a professional design. Then you have to quantify your achievements, right? There can be multiple achievements which cannot be quantifiable, right? For an example, There can be, qualitative achievements, right? Like for an example, like I mentioned, say that you have, we'll take an example, right? You have gone through a project, right? You have gone through a project where 10 members were competing against you, right? 10 members were competing against you, and you were awarded as the best project, right? So you can just mention as won the best project, right? But if you have to quantify that, this is purely an example. And so 10 members might seem low to you, but again, it's not about the number, but about the message. So you can mention, to quantify that, you can mention participated in, in a competition where was placed first out of a 10-member team. So likewise, whatever your achievements, try to quantify it so that we can understand how big or small, or we can evaluate that achievement, and then showcase results. Like, again, when you're mentioning about, for an example, if you're mentioning about your internship experience, rather than saying, I worked on this, you can mention, I worked on this to achieve this, right? So showcasing result is again very important for you to have that competitive advantage among the other applicants. Right. So final question which I get is how can we do a great or a perfect CV, right? Some might say they can do it through Microsoft Word. Some might say they can do it in a and which are free to use, right? So these are some of my recommendations. You can just visit Canva, no resume. To include how better to word it. Likewise, those small tips you will get in many of these online tools. So visit them. It's like I mentioned, it's very user friendly, and you can make your perfect CV. Right. So coming back to the questions which we asked previously, right? So how long should your CV be? 1 page, 2 pages? The correct answer would be as long as you want it to be. Like I mentioned, when I say as long as you want it to be, you don't have to, for an undergraduate trainee or for a fresh graduate, you don't have to go on for 4 or 5 pages because you don't have much of experience, probably 1 or 2 internship experience, right? Those experience can go up to 1 page or to 2 pages or even to 3 pages. It is okay as long as you want it to be, right? But what is important is to give the correct message, precise information without exaggerating and giving falsehood information. What is the mandatory piece of information from below? Like I mentioned, very, very important, contact detail. NIC number is also important, but say for an example, if a candidate has given the NIC number and not the contact detail, we will not be able to contact them, right? We will not be able to move forward then. But if they have given the contact detail and not given the NIC number, then we can, simply call the candidate and get the NIC number, right? So likewise, contact detail is very, very important. Not only the phone number, but also the email address. Non-mandatory piece of information from below, degree, email address, referees. So one question which I commonly get is whether to include the referees or not. See, if you have referees, you can mention them. It's okay, but it's not mandatory, right? So that's what that's what the question is. Non-mandatory piece of information. your bachelor's or your degree program which you have completed or reading for is a must to include, because that is how we will evaluate you. Email address, again, if you have to schedule interviews, if you have to pass any information, it is a must for you to include. But referee details, at the point of you sharing the CV to us or going through the interview process, referee details will not be required at that time. It could be required after you get selected through the process, right? After you get selected, for us to do the reference check, the referee details will be required. But at the time of you sending the CV to screen and shortlist and interview you, that point it's not required. So it is good to include, but it's not mandatory. Right. What helps an interviewer to get to know your technical know-how? Correct answer would be the project information you are a part of. So when you are a part of a project, you have had hands-on experience or hands-on exposure on relevant technologies, relevant tools, likewise. But a list of programming languages you have heard of will not be of any use, right? Even a non-technical person could say, I have heard about this, so I am suitable, right? That's not the case. You should have had the exposure, you should have had the hands-on experience on those languages. O-level and A-level details also will not make the interviewer to evaluate you. Where do CVs get accumulated? I told you it will be the application tracking system, ATS. It is again where your CV will be automatically reviewed on the keywords which you use, and based on the job description or the job requirement which we have put out, and will give in a rating compared to the other candidates. So don't worry about your CV going to unwanted or unnecessary people. It's only in the application tracking system, and see the CV which you apply to IFS or any organization, only limited people or the people who should have the access to review those CVs will be able to review them. Not all will have the access to see them. So don't worry about your information going here and there. If you're applying through an ATS, that is, it is only within the ATS, and viewing access of your CV is only between relevant selected parties. Right, so we have few minutes left, and I open the floor for you all for any questions you all want to get answered from us. So you can either direct message or send in the chat openly so that everyone also is visible too. We will take a couple of minutes to answer these questions. Right, so I've got a question. Imagine I include 5 projects in my CV, 3 with the same stack, same tech stack, and other 2 with different tech stack. Instead of 3 projects with same tech stack, I put only the best one total projects in my CV is there. Okay. Essential to mention projective individual or group. Okay, right. So I have got 2 questions in the same question itself. One, so first question, if I understood properly, it's about, so they are asking whether, just a second, if they have done multiple projects, but they have used similar technologies for 3 projects and different technologies for 2 projects, how best they can include. Right. So, oops, sorry. Okay, anyways, it's okay. So how best you can include is, you can mention the projects. What you can do is you can mention the project scope and the technologies you have worked with. So that will give a clear understanding about what you have done, what was the intention on that project, and the technologies or tools which you have used. If it's similar technologies and tools, you can couple them, or say put all those in together, 1, 2, 3, and then include the technologies you have worked with for all of those 3 projects. Then mention the 2 projects. Then again mention the project scope details, and then mention the technologies you were exposed to for those two projects which you have captured. Then is it essential to mention project is individual or group? Include only the individual contribution is not enough. No. So definitely you have to mention whether it was an individual project or a group project. So when you mention individual projects and group projects, it's not only the technical skills we're evaluating. It could be we can evaluate on how well you work in a team, how well you are with team members at a time when they need help, what kind of steps have you taken. So those type of things also will be evaluated, right? It's not only the technical skills. So it's always a good, it's always encouraged to mention whether the project which you have handled is individual or group, because if you're shortlisted and during the interviews, the interviewers will have questions based on what is mentioned in the CV, right? Is it good to include social media links to CV? Right, very, very interesting, right? Social media, when you say social media, if it's relevant to the job, right, you don't have to mention your Instagram. Maybe if you're having a YouTube channel based on your projects which you're doing, the learnings which you have done, or freelancing projects which you're doing. So those type of things, it's good to include because it shows that you have had the additional exposure. So uh, linking your Instagram, which has nothing to do with the job which you're applying for, is not of useful, right? Linking your, like I mentioned, YouTube channel which you have had. That's a very example, right? Example on a YouTube channel which you have handled or done um, on the projects which you are doing, freelancing projects likewise. So that will be a nice thing to have. Linking to your LinkedIn is very, very important because certain details which you are not captured in the CV, we can get it from the LinkedIn. So anyways, we tend to look at the LinkedIn profile also when you apply, but linking that to the CV is much encouraged. On that note, I would finally ask all of you to keep your LinkedIn profiles updated. Keeping your profile picture updated, LinkedIn banner, your current title, what you're doing, your qualifications, all of that, keep it updated. And, post also, you can show in your journey, maybe in your university journey, like, right, you have done, your projects, what you're doing, small things, which could be interesting for the audience, which could also be interesting for the organization which you're applying for, to show that you are very much active and engaged in, and you're passionate about what you're doing. So those small things, it can be, like I mentioned, it can be very small for you, but it can be at a point a decision-making factor when it comes to your candidacy with an organization. Right. Okay. Should I include my volunteer experience, clubs and societies in my CV? Good one. Again, you can include it, but it would be better. Now, say for an example, you're applying for an HR role, right? When it comes to HR, you are working with people. And if you have had voluntary experience working with people, it would be very nice to add to the CV. But some other voluntary experience would not be actually required. But again, there is no harm in including them. What is encouraged is whatever experience, voluntary experience, clubs and societies and all of that. If you think it is relevant to the job which you're applying for, it is always encouraged for you to include them in your CV. Right. Some say ATS can't track details in 2-column CVs. Is it true? Please advise. So this will depend on ATS to ATS. There are different features which certain ATS has and certain ATS does not have. So I'm not sure about, I can't comment on other ATSs, but if you're applying for IFS, it's always it will get tracked, even if it's in two columns or what, it will get tracked. And the points, like I mentioned, if you're applying for a job and after you go through the job description, the keywords, if you're looking for, say for an example, again, I'm coming back to the example.NET, and if that is what is required, emphasize on the experience you have had with .NET technology. That will again give a great boost on your CV in terms of mapping it with ATS and keywords and the job description. So again, please make a note not to exaggerate and give in false information. But if you genuinely had experience with that, emphasize that and include that in your CV. Do we have to include A-level results, ranks, and Z-score? Okay, so A-level results is perfectly fine to include, but you don't have to necessarily include each subject, what is the result. Likewise, you can, for an example, you did your A-levels in chemistry. Z-score, if you want to share it, it's perfectly fine. Z-score, island rank or district rank, likewise, that is nice to share. But again, it's not a mandatory information. If you're sharing your A-level results or O-level results, please make sure not to include it subject-wise, because if you're going to include that, it's going to take a half page of your CV. So rather than that, you can just include your results in one line and then mention about your Z-score or your district or island rank in the other line. That will be more than enough for a recruiter or an interviewer. Right. Any other questions? Right. If not, I think we are on time as well to conclude. If you have any questions, you can always. I'm sorry, I will have to share my screen again. Yes. So if you have any other questions, you can reach out to us through these platforms. You can reach out to me directly in LinkedIn, Sharon Fernando. If you have any questions which you'd like to ask me in directly with me, you can reach out to me in LinkedIn as well. Okay, I just got a question. These days, I'm preparing my CV for applying internships. I have finished. Message, is it possible to have a feedback about my CV? Right, great, super. Can be done. If you don't mind, please reach out to me through LinkedIn. I will have, personally, I will have a review. And then if there is any tips and tricks which I can include, I can mention to you to make it better, I will let you know. But please make sure to ping me through LinkedIn, please. And I think we will have a follow-up session. Now you all are aware of how to make the perfect CV. The next step will be, about how you are to prepare yourself for an interview. And that will follow up with a session, I think, next week. So we are looking forward to see all of you there as well. Right. Thank you very much. We have a small link for you to give in the feedback. Please give in your feedback on the session. And yeah, thank you once again.
All right, sir. As we conclude today's session, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to Mr. Sharon Fernando and all the members from IFS for sharing their valuable knowledge and expertise with us. Your guidance on CV writing has been incredibly valuable and will undoubtedly help our participants as they prepare their job searches. Thank you.